We like crises because it's good for J.P. Morgan Chase. Not really. I tell people when Credit Suisse went bankrupt at the First Republic, it was terrible for the banking industry. I think we can make everything better, including that, by just changing and modifying certain rules and regulations, letting market makers intermediate more in the market. But to give you a number, like just J.P. Morgan alone buys and sells $3 trillion a day. And we move $10 trillion a day of money. And we're probably a tenth. So the money moving around the world.
We'll leave this at this point with a quick reminder that you can watch it in its entirety if you go to our website, cspan.org. Live now to Capitol Hill this morning, where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Dan Caine are about to testify on the Pentagon's 2026 budget request. Live coverage on C-SPAN 3.
Good morning. The Subcommittee on Defense will come to order. Today, the subcommittee will convene for an open oversight hearing to receive testimony regarding the Department of Defense from the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Mr. Secretary, General Caine, congratulations to you both on your new roles and welcome to your first hearing before the subcommittee. We look forward to working with you closely to provide for our common defense. And a very special welcome to Mrs. Bryn McDonnell. Bryn, it's great to have you back here in this room. You sat beside me on this side of the dais, so it might be a new feeling sitting where you are now. So I'm sure it's a bittersweet that you're no longer serving as a dependent member of my staff, but I commend your service to the nation. And Mr. Secretary, you're lucky to have her. I have no doubt that she'll provide you with the same level of faithful advice that she provided for me. The work we do in this committee has never been more important. We are navigating an increasingly complex and uncertain global environment, with adversaries like China and Russia pursuing aggressive actions and challenges in regions like the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, and beyond. Our military must be prepared to meet those challenges, and that preparation requires substantial investments in both personnel and equipment. But we also must be responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollars. Balancing national security priorities with fiscal responsibility is a delicate but necessary task. Mr. Secretary, I commend you for quickly hitting the ground running and focusing on your key priorities of reviving the warrior ethos, building our military, reestablishing deterrence, and ensuring the defense of our homeland. The American people expect their borders to be secure. The challenges of our southern border, including the ongoing flow of illegal drugs, human trafficking, and other illicit activities, are growing threats to our security and must be addressed. The cartels exploiting our border and increasingly sophisticated and dangerous. The Department of Defense has a critical role in this fight. Mr. Secretary, I applaud your efforts in focusing resources to ensure the border is secured. I look forward to more discussion about what resources are necessary to keep the momentum going without compromising our ability to meet threats abroad. I also want to hear from you both about the readiness of our force. I have heard from senior military leaders and service members alike about the ongoing concerns related to the health of our force, including the need for modernization, the ability to respond quickly to emerging threats. While this committee has consistently provided funding for investments in next-generation systems, from hypersonics to autonomous platforms, we're still seeing troubling delays and cost overruns in a number of programs. We simply cannot deter near-peer competitors like China by falling short in sustaining our defense and industrial base. That is why it's critical that we continue to focus on the pace of modernization, particularly in areas like air superiority and munitions production. The committee has been steadfast in our support of entities within the department that challenges the status quo, such as DIU, the Office of Strategic Capital, and APFIT. These innovation entities are alternative pathways to deliver capability quickly to the warfighter, and I would appreciate the opportunity to work with you to bolster these activities as a way to bring disruption and competition into the department, which, in my experience, can yield better and faster results. I also want to discuss the critical importance of our partnerships and alliances. The AUKUS agreement is one of the most significant defense initiatives in recent years, with the potential to reshape the strategic landscape in the Indo-Pacific. As we pursue these initiatives, we must ensure that we are maintaining our own military capability. Our shipbuilding programs remain over budget and behind schedule and under-delivered. This is simply not acceptable, and we need to have credible, executable naval force structure plan to keep pace with threats that we face, particularly from China, while ensuring taxpayer accountability. Finally, we must always remember the men and women who wear the uniform. Far too long, we heard from too many junior enlisted service members who were struggling with basic needs. These men and women, the backbone of our armed forces, they perform the tough and often dangerous work that keeps our country safe. I was proud to help secure a 10% raise for our junior enlisted service members on top of the 4.5% raise that all service members received last year. It's critical that we continue to provide support for all those who fight in defense of our great nation. We ask a lot of our military, and the strategic landscape is more complex than ever. I look forward to a frank discussion on how we are matching resources to priorities and honoring our commitments to both readiness and to our people. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Ms. McCollum, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of you for appearing here today. And I'd like to thank all the men and women who serve in our military, both wearing the uniform and as civilians. As I say often, national security is holistic and not just defense spending. Do Americans have the health care that they need? Are we providing good nutrition to our kids so that they can eventually grow up strong and serve in our armed forces? Cuts to Medicaid and SNAP and the reconciliation bill put the whole of our society at risk, and I believe that this weakens our national security. Also, billionaires can have their tax breaks. It's also irresponsible for us to assume that you can fund the defense programs through an unstable reconciliation process. That's why it's never happened before in our nation's history. What else has never happened before was the Departments of Defense operating under a full-year continuing resolution. The CR was endorsed by President Trump, OMB Director Voigt, and you, Mr. Secretary. After enactment of the CR, the Department had 45 days to submit a spend plan to Congress. In many cases, it ignored congressional intent. OMB has an obligation to get money to the services so that contracts can be executed in a timely fashion. But every defense company, from the smallest startup to the largest prime, has told me it is going too slow. Time and taxpayers' dollars are being wasted. Our national security is being put at risk because of the lag time. CRs are simply wasteful. But the point of this hearing is the President's fiscal 2026 budget request, and we don't have it. It was due in February. Today is June 10th. 4 months from now is the end of the fiscal year, and all we have is a very rough draft. The DoD has failed to submit a complete request. So today we are forced to mark up at a rushed and, for me, an incomplete Defense Appropriations Act. I don't blame Chairman Cole or Chairman Calvert. The fault is squarely on the administration. But just like the CR, this has national security ramifications. We do not have the critical information, the granular details on the DoD programs that we need to make in order to be effective and efficient with our decisions. The President proposes, Congress disposes, and that's how our government works. How can I work with this administration in good faith when we don't have a full blueprint of the President's priorities? For example, Golden Dome at this point is merely a concept. It's not a plan. None of us have been briefed yet on how you intend to spend $175 billion or deliver this program in 3 short years. We do not know if priorities like Golden Dome, if they do not survive the reconciliation process, will What will the department do? You can't come back to this committee and ask us to fill those gaps. Defense spending should never have been included in reconciliation. Mr. Secretary, it's still incumbent upon you to provide us with the real budget request. That's the only way to finish a full-year bill that will address DoD's complex issues like delays to the Virginia and Columbia-class submarine programs, the skyrocketing cost of the Sentinel program, ensuring our F-35 fighters are operational, and taking care of the quality of life issues for our service members and their families that they deserve. We also must understand the administration's approach to geopolitical concerns, like Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, or plans to address the military capabilities of the People's Republic of China, or adequately support our future military posture in the Arctic as the polar ice cap continues to melt. We don't know the answers because the administration has not submitted a budget. Mr. Secretary, let me close with this. There's no secret that we have some serious disagreements. The President's decision to call the National Guard troops to Los Angeles was premature, and the decision to deploy active duty Marines as well is downright escalatory. Active duty military has absolutely no role in domestic law enforcement, and they are not trained for those missions. I ask you, Mr. Secretary, and I ask the President, follow the law. I was also appalled by your decision to fire Chairman Brown, Admiral Franchetti, and other military leaders who served our nation with distinction. You fired them without giving a single reason why. Many Americans, myself included, have witnessed what is a deliberate effort to silence and diminish the achievements of minorities and women in the military. Their dedication, their heroism, their sacrifice on behalf of our nation deserve recognition, not erasure. As a former history teacher, I know and acknowledge uncomfortable truths about our own history. It is the only way, when we recognize them, that we move forward together. Since World War II, the Department has made great strides in building a military that is more reflective of the population of this nation. That should be celebrated. It should not be reversed. That's how we build a more perfect union. We build it together. But, Mr. Secretary, today I have a job to do. We must provide the resources necessary to make sure our men and women in uniform can accomplish their missions and come home safely. And on that, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you and I both agree. To do that, we need a budget from you as soon as possible, a complete budget. I look forward to your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the courtesy, and I yield back.
Thank you. And before we hear from witness, I'd like to recognize the distinguished chairman of the full committee, my good friend, Chairman Tom Cole, for any statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, and always good to be here with my good friend and negotiating partner, the Ranking Member of the full committee, Ms. Delora. Welcome, Secretary Hegseth and General Caine, and we thank you for your service to our great nation. As today marks your first appearance before the subcommittee, I want to reaffirm my commitment to work with you and work to ensure that we have a strong defense. We convene at a time of significant global uncertainty. The threats facing America are diverse and evolving and demand a strong, agile, and effectively funded Department of Defense. As Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, my primary responsibility is to ensure that taxpayer dollars are allocated wisely and effectively to safeguard our security. First, I want to address the readiness of our armed forces. We must ensure that our troops are fully equipped, trained, and prepared to meet any challenge. I'm particularly interested in the current state of our defense industrial base and the steps being taken to address any identified shortfalls in being able to meet production demands. Next, I want to address the modernization of our military capabilities. It takes us too long to acquire new weapon systems. Meanwhile, our adversaries are rapidly developing advanced technologies. We must not surrender our technological edge or allow our forces to be under-equipped and outgunned. I'd like to hear about your plans for Golden Dome, hypersonics, and other programs that are evolving with the constantly changing nature of war. It's imperative that we invest in technologies that will define the future fight. At the same time, we must remain realistic about development timelines and avoid overcommitting to a single approach at the expense of adaptability. It's important that this subcommittee understands how trade-offs and risks were approached in this budget. I've been concerned about capability gaps during transitions from one platform to the next. And while space is the next frontier, I'm hearing more and more that space offers an answer to every problem. While I'm optimistic about space-based capabilities, I certainly think platforms like the E7 offer tremendous capabilities until, and frankly beyond, when space is fully online. We need diversified capability and support for programs across domains to ensure continued military dominance. I also want to hear more about the Department's efforts to produce a budget that balances maintaining a strong defense posture with exercising fiscal responsibility. I'll be seeking assurances that the Department's maximizing efficiency and eliminating wasteful spending. And Mr. Secretary, I look forward to hearing more about what you've done with the efforts undertaken so far. I must say I do agree with my friend, Ms. McCollum. We need more information than we've gotten from OMB. That's not your responsibility, but it's critical for us to be able to make the decisions we're going to have to make. And again, I understand all the complexities of being a new administration. Nobody ever meets the timeline when they first come into office. And we've gotten a lot of good information from OMB, but the reality is we frankly need more than we've received so far to make the decisions that we're called upon to make. I want to emphasize the importance of congressional oversight, and again, I'm committed to working with the Department of Defense to ensure that our national security objectives are met. However, we also have a duty to hold it accountable for its spending and performance. And I think I can speak for almost everyone in this room. No one liked the way the fiscal year 2025 process ended. Again, that's not your fault. That's our fault. And there's plenty of blame to go around. But it's certainly an experience I don't want to repeat. I don't want you or your colleagues at the Department of Defense to have to operate under a CR again for the coming year. I know the difficulties that places on you. Every member of this committee knows that. You've got my commitment. We're going to work hard to avoid that this year. But again, we need some help from all concerned in the process to achieve that goal. And almost no one, again, as I said, liked the way the process ended, but we owe it to the men and women in uniform to get this right. It'll require collaboration with the department to inform and produce a product that will meet that goal. I look forward to being your partner in that effort. And again, I want to thank you for being here today. And again, I want to thank you for your extraordinary service to this country before you assumed this position. I think that's one of the reasons why we've done as well recruiting, is people that are thinking about putting on the uniform of the United States have confidence in you because you've made that decision and you served this country with distinction before you ever came on this post. And leading by example is an important thing, and I want to thank you for the example you set for men and women that wear the uniform of the United States. With that, again, welcome in your first appearance, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to now turn to the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, for any opening comments.
Thank you so much, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCollum, and always to, again, my dear friend, the chairman of the committee. We've worked together for many years in producing, I believe, bipartisan appropriations bills, and it's our attempt to be able to do that this go-round as well. Thank you for holding this oversight hearing on President Trump's Department of Defense. To our witnesses, Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Caine, Ms. McDonnell, welcome to the House of Representatives, and thank you for appearing before us today. Defense is the largest portion of our discretionary budget, yet you have still not sent this committee a complete budget request. We are in mid-June, Mr. Secretary. We are marking up a defense funding bill in a few hours, and yet we have no idea what your department actually needs. We have no details as to how you want to implement your plans. We should be discussing how you plan to get our submarine programs in order, how the Black Hawk platform will be utilized into the future, and how you plan to improve our service members and their families' quality of life. It is unacceptable for us to move forward with a defense funding bill without this information, and it is regrettable that the administration has put us in this position. If we cannot complete this process on time, we risk yet another continuing resolution, which is wasteful, inefficient, and detrimental to our military readiness. Already, your methods for funding our nation's defense programs are as unwise as they are unprecedented. You backed the first full-year continuing resolution for the Department of Defense. Particularly, defense has always been opposed to moving in that direction because of the uncertainty that a continuing resolution portends for defense and for the defense industry. Now you are relying on a risky and a partisan budget reconciliation process instead of regular appropriations to fund vital programs. The appropriations process is wherein lies the power of the purse, according to the U.S. Constitution. However, this is still an essential opportunity for oversight, and the Department of Defense under your leadership is in desperate need of it. Your tenure as Secretary has been marked by endless chaos. Your first day in office, the Inspector General, whose job is to investigate waste, fraud, and abuse, was fired. Weeks later, you dismissed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and 5 other admirals and generals. Your careless sharing of military secrets in a non-secure signal chat, which could have placed American airmen in danger, led to the firing of former National Security Advisor Waltz. You have directly fired several of your top advisors, and the ranks of civilian staff have been decimated within key agency posts, including the Defense Health Agency and the Missile Defense Agency. Mr. Secretary, of all the cabinet departments, stability at the Department of Defense is the most critical for Americans' safety and security. Going after waste in defense and an audit among contractors long overdue, as is a fresh look at defense after what we learned in Ukraine. But that requires thoughtfulness and cooperation, not rash and reckless purges of leadership and rank-and-file staff. And firings based on political loyalty are an affront to what our Constitution and our military stands for and depends on. Meanwhile, this administration has done seemingly everything possible to alienate America on the world stage and turn our back on our allies, particularly Ukraine. Our belligerent trade wars and the dismantling of our humanitarian mission all have implications for our national security. Why would anyone trust us or partner with us when we are busy undermining our allies' economies and encouraging China to fill the vacuum we are leaving by abandoning our humanitarian mission? The bags of flour that I've seen on foreign soil that say USAID, U.S. product of the United States of America, will be gone and instead will be replaced by China or Russia or Iran. Conflicts around the world that President Trump promised he would resolve overnight are only escalating. While we need to focus and prepare for threats to freedom and democracy worldwide, the Department of Defense is mired in controversy and chaos. The American people expect, deserve, and demand better from their military leadership, and the lawlessness across the government must end. This administration has unlawfully dismantled agencies and stolen funding across the government to give billionaires a tax break. America's future soldiers are learning in our public schools. Our future sailors might rely on Medicaid to see a doctor. Our future airmen and women might only have a meal to eat because of SNAP or food stamps, or they may live in subsidized housing. If tomorrow's service members are worried today about having their most basic needs met, then they are being held back from their fullest potential, and that weakens our national security. National security is not just machines and munitions. It requires a whole-of-government approach, which is why this administration must provide us an acceptable and complete budget as soon as possible so we can conduct proper oversight, and why this administration must cease the lawless stealing of appropriated funds. I thank the Chair and Ranking Member, and I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. We'll now begin with witness testimony. Gentlemen, without objection, your full written testimony will be placed in the record. Secretary Hegseth, we can start with you for your summary of your remarks. Secretary, you recognize.
Well, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who is performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. I'm also proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. Today, as they do every day, they are keeping America safe. They're defending the homeland, they're standing up and deterring communist China, and we're working hand in glove with allies and partners to achieve peace through strength. I'd actually like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that will improve quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, I've directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in improving the living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moving, and improving the quality of care provided by the defense healthcare system. Now, the best part of my job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. I hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face those challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback that I've received from the force, and I'll keep listening and looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, over $1 trillion for national security, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. In the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. We've found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department, and we have reinvested those savings. We've killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. We are re-optimizing the civilian workforce and repositioning resources to better support our warfighters. We're working with the Department of Homeland Security to increase border security. We've reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We've defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to achieve peace through strength. To carry out the President's mission, we have 3 core priorities, as was mentioned: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we're restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump has charged me with focusing on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness. That's exactly what we're doing. We're focused on what's important: warfighting and warriors. We're sweeping away distractions and bloated bureaucracy. We've set standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. Our force is responding positively, incredibly, to these changes. And thanks to President Trump, recruiting and retention is higher than it's been in decades at historic numbers. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. Second, we're rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged, yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump is correcting those mistakes. We're reviving the defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, rapidly fielding emerging technologies to put the best weapons in the hands of our warfighters. This includes investment of $25 billion in the Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. This budget will revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, $47 billion in shipbuilding total. The budget increases significantly funding for autonomous systems, long-range fires, drones, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our warfighters. Third, we're reestablishing deterrence. When our opponent sees our well-equipped, tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test American resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home, and it starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of the southern border, with crossings already dropped 99.9%. It also starts in our neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere. As you know, as we've said, the Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled twice to the Indo-Pacific region to meet with our allies and partners, and they have responded. As we shift in that direction, President Trump looks to those allies and partners to step up, to share in the burden of their own defense. He also sees them, as I do, as force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress in that. As the President has rightly pointed out, it's only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. So the Department of Defense is executing a common-sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious, and so must our investments be. So what this budget does, it matches capabilities to threats. We must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and we must act fast. This committee is our critical partner in everything we do, and your leadership and oversight is essential. So we look forward to accomplishing these goals, to achieving peace through strength, to supporting our warriors, protecting our citizens and taxpayers, together with you. May God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Caine, you're now recognized for your remarks.
Thank you, Chair Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, other leaders, members of the committee. I'm honored here today to join Secretary Hegseth and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you today to testify on the President's fiscal year 2026 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability, and lethality to our taxpayers' investments, ensuring that every expenditure increases the survivability of our joint force, providing our warfighters with the advanced capabilities and capacity and cutting-edge technologies required to dominate our adversaries. I have deep gratitude for everyone in this room and your commitment and cooperation to help us deliver the capability and capacity for our 2.8 million members of our joint force, the civilians that serve alongside us, and of course their families, all required to work together to deliver, as the Secretary said, peace through strength. It is my responsibility as chairman to understand the global set of conditions, advise the Secretary, and integrate our joint forces to confront and manage risks worldwide. This demands a comprehensive understanding of all domains: space, cyber, air, sea, undersea, all military services, each region, and at times our allies, partners, of course, as we consider carefully what they bring to the table, and to inform the decisions that you'll make to give us the finite taxpayer dollars required to ensure the greatest strategic impact with that investment. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation against adversaries seeking to do us harm. We are relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to deter our adversaries at every opportunity, while ensuring we're positioned to win on the battlefields of the future when called upon. This budget empowers the joint force to get after Secretary Hegseth's 3 pillars, as he mentioned: restoring warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing deterrence, and ensures, from my perspective, the joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready. The President's budget invests in our warfighters. To win on the battlefields of future, as I said, our forces must be properly armed with the right capabilities: lethal, modern, reliable, survivable, and at scale. Victory requires people and platforms that will overmatch the enemy day after day. Systems that will be required to operate under the harshest of conditions, and technologies that will give our warfighters the decisive edge that they deserve. This budget gives us the necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible talent, and we need to get every bit of it moving in the same direction. This budget also helps the joint force get globally integrated. I think we're relationship entrepreneurs within the joint force, which requires us to work together with the military, our allies and partners, industry, and of course the interagency to be connected before crisis begins. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always on the account, anticipating the next fight, not fighting the last fight, and delivering for our force and their families. Our force and our families are the last and most important part of this budget. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving quality of life, housing, medical care, and the moving process. Along with our most precious asset, our people must be properly armed, integrated, and ready. I also want to highlight the service member over my right shoulder quickly, the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman who will retire after 37 years, Sergeant Major Troy Black. He didn't know I was going to say this today. So in conclusion, it's an honor every day to serve alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, and families that our nation has ever known. I assure this committee that the joint force remains committed and capable and ready to defend our nation. With your continued support and prudent investment, we'll maintain that competitive edge at scale. I want to also remember today our deployed and their families who are out there on the front edge of our nation, making sure that we're safe here in this committee room today. And I would be remiss, as I always try to remember our fallen and their families who've made the ultimate sacrifice. I thank the Congress for your support and collaboration. I thank this committee for your efforts and leadership, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I want to make sure that each member has a chance to ask questions, so everybody will have 5 minutes for the remarks and answers. Remember, when the little light comes on and it's yellow, you got 1 minute left. So I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Secretary, the Department recently issued a memo reducing the civilian personnel at the Office of Director of Operational Test and Evaluation by about 74% and reduced the budget by 80%. Now, everyone on this subcommittee can attest that I've been beating the drum for reductions in DoD personnel, civilian personnel, since I became a member of the committee, and that's a long time. In fact, I have a bill that would require the Department to reduce civilian staff by 15% based on merit. However, I think we need to be intentional and clear-eyed about the functions that we reduce. As you know, DOT&E was established by Congress in '83 to centralize and strengthen operational testing, ensure that weapon systems are rigorously evaluated for combat effectiveness, suitability, and to address deficiencies in oversight and standardization within the Department of Defense. And there's a lot of examples of DTO&E catching flaws that would have catastrophic consequences for our military, including loss of life. One example is the M2, M3 Bradley, which was designed to transport troops, provides fire support. The Army approved a system touting the armor, firepower, and mobility. However, when the independent testing was done, it was found out the aluminum armor was not a good idea and was susceptible to failure. And early versions caught fire and burned. And so obviously we made changes and rectified that, and the Bradley's been a valuable part of our military ever since. But we share the same goals to create a more efficient, leaner DoD, but with things like Golden Dome coming along, we want to make sure that the technologies we pick are going to work and that we fund them accordingly. So I understand the reduction is seeking to remove duplicative functions. We're not interested in delays, and I know that that's pretty high on your list. However, a layer of independent testing is, I think, important. In light of that, with the reduction, how will you ensure that the military services tasked with testing and evaluating their own programs will not revert to past behavior which showed they would approve systems in order to meet operational needs or budget timelines? So with that, Mr. Secretary, see if we can have an answer to that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. And how we evaluated DOT&E was a reflection of the overall approach we take in the department, which is how efficiently do we operate, where are the bottlenecks? We talk about the things you talk about every single day. How do we get how do we get systems, platforms, future capabilities in the hands of warfighters as quickly as possible? And so a review led by myself, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, our friends at DOJ who've worked with us, have helped us look and identify places where we might find efficiencies. Now, I work, and my hands are directly in the middle of that, to ensure that as we seek those efficiencies and reduce those redundancies, we're not doing so in a way that undermines our capabilities or safety for warfighters in the future. DOT&E, after we got rid of a lot of the really low-hanging fruit of tens of billions of contracts and things that we've reduced, that were duplicative, that were completely wasteful, that were creating PowerPoint presentations that no one was looking at, you start to look at things like DOT&E, testing and evaluation, which in a headline sounds quite significant, and it can be in many ways. But when you ask the services, you ask the joint staff, you talk to the comptroller and CAPE, and you go across the other undersecretaries, there's a universal recognition that DOT&E's mission has bloated and expanded well beyond the scope of what it was supposed to be, and as a result was expanding by months and sometimes even more than that, the amount of time it was taking for systems to actually make it in the hands of warfighters. So you still have services in other places doing that testing and evaluation. This remains in place at a right size. So we see it as a right sizing of DOT&E. So it still provides that oversight and ensures across the joint force we're recognizing the challenges, but it doesn't add unnecessary time. So we recognize why it was created. We want it to do its job, but not more than its job. And that's what we believe it's doing by reforming it.
Well, thank you for that answer. Obviously, as we expect new systems, new technologies to come online quickly, we want to make sure that this committee that we're funding it properly and make sure that you can handle the volume in which that you're anticipating, especially with a new technology like Golden Dome, which we still, as the ranking member pointed out, we still haven't seen a clear definition of what it is and what it's a strategic theater system, lower 48, Hawaii, Alaska, the rest of it, and how these layered systems are going to be put out there to defend the country and to make sure that we're not spending a lot of money unnecessarily. So testing and evaluation is going to be an important part of that. With that, I recognize Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, I plan to ask you some budget questions about the following: the cost of the Qatar plane, where the money from the Army's parade is coming from, or the National Guard deployments to the border, where that funding is coming from. I honor and celebrate the United States Army, but I'd like to know how much this parade is going to cost. I have sent the department letters on several occasions on this, and I'm still waiting for a response. But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed, and that is the President's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we need the citizens of Minnesota request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard, who have worked on crowd control, they were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV, but this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief of Police to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles is absent a clear coordination, presents a significant logistical operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city, the end of his quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions, though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California, and how is it going to affect this budget or the budget we're currently serving under? How much are these deployments going to cost for both the Marines and the National Guard? And what training or duties are not taking place because of these deployments? Where in your limited budget, sir, are you going to find, in the remainder of this fiscal year, are you going to pull the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
I have limited time. I asked a budget
and they
question.
Are being,
Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LAPD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have implemented. The police chief said she was overwhelmed, so we helped.
If the Secretary is not going to ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important. What training missions aren't happening? Where are you pulling the money from? And how are you planning this in the moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time and I will yield it back to the chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I want to just let us know what accounts you're pulling the money to fund.
Thankfully, unlike the previous administration, we've got a 13% increase in our defense budget, and we will have the capability to cover down on contingencies, which is something the National Guard and the Marine plan for. So we have the funding to cover down on contingencies, especially ones as important as maintaining law and order in a major American city. As far as training, all of the units on the ground have been fully trained in their capabilities of what they're executing on the ground.
For budgetary, if he needs to get back to the committee with the numbers, I'd appreciate it, both current and present.
Happy to submit them for the record.
Gentlemen will receive an answer to the question for the record. Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, again, welcome. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I'm very concerned about retiring legacy systems. They need to be retired. No problem there, but doing it too fast and not having replacements coming online. I've got a particular concern where E3s, as my colleagues know, AWACS, there's 31 of them in the fleet, or there were. 15 have been retired since 23. They fly out of Tinker Air Force Base for the most part, which is in my district, hence my parochial, but I think legitimate interest here. Very interested in seeing, and this committee's done some important work in positioning us to acquire and field E7s. It's not a new technology. Our friends in Australia use it. Our friends in the United Kingdom use it. It's much superior to what we have. And so, again, this is one of the areas where we're concerned where we don't have the budget information from OMB we'd like. So I'm curious about what your thoughts are on the platform and replacing them. Do you have any idea about the speed and costs that you're planning to move in that particular area going forward?
Well, I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. And priorities and decisions are what we're in the business of on the budget side, on the capabilities side. And I think President Trump has charged us with making the big, difficult decisions after a lot of deferred maintenance and deferred decisions to ignore parochial priorities in large part and focus on what the department needs and where it needs it and when it needs it. And that means some tough calls. And there are platforms we've supported as a result, and there's some platforms and systems that we won't support going forward because the services have requested it, or we've identified those are systems and platforms that don't orient toward a future threat. I mean, we've learned a lot from what's happened in Ukraine. We've learned a lot from what China is attempting to do and the systems they're building. So if we have systems and platforms that are not survivable in the modern battlefield, or they don't give us an advantage in a future fight, we have to make the tough decisions right now. That's my job, that's the chairman's job, and it's our job to fund those new systems and make tough calls. So the E7 is an example of that. We're going to fund existing platforms that are there more robustly and make sure they're modernized. But we believe most of the ISR, or a great deal of the ISR in the future, will be space-based, and not in a scientific space-based we hope we'll get there, but in a we're funding capabilities that will surpass some of those airborne capabilities. So we're willing to continue to review things like the E7, but from our view, investments in existing systems that carry forward that capability alongside even bigger investments in space-based ISR gives us the kind of advantages we need on a future battlefield. I
think that's a fair point. I would point out, I've been on this committee a long time. I watched the U.S. Army waste $29 billion on the future combat system because it was going to be so great. And it didn't, and we wasted a ton of money. We got a platform here that works. Space is great. It's unknown. It's undeveloped. And I would just urge you to look at this pretty carefully as you make the decision. We certainly will as a committee. I don't know how much time I've got left because the clock's not running.
You're the chairman, so.
Well, that's I will try and be respectful to the committee and certainly respectful to our witnesses. I have one other quick question, if I may, and I think probably a lot of members have had these concerns. Look, I'm largely very much in favor of the hiring freezes and some of the things you've done personnel-wise. So this is not a criticism, but I do hear that we have certain exempt positions like aircraft mechanics, like firefighters. We're having a problem with that. Again, Fort Sill, I got the home and the field artillery and air defense artillery as well. It's a pretty military district. Nobody's being critical, but we're having a hard time getting, these are exempt categories, those filled. Can you sort of tell me where we're at on that? Because these are mission critical people.
It's a great question, sir. It's something we're paying very close attention to. In fact, we meet on it multiple times a week. It includes shipbuilding capabilities, child care centers. There are a lot of positions that affect our industrial base, our capabilities, or our families that we are working diligently to ensure we're getting those exceptions as quickly as possible, those waivers. But we're also trying to do right by right-sizing the civilian force, which has gotten too bloated too fast and has mostly been right-sized through voluntary separations through DRP. So I acknowledge that. And we can get you a full list of the exemptions as well to make sure you understand where we're making trade-offs.
I'd appreciate that very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back. Thanks for your courtesy.
Thanks. Gentlemen, Mr. Lauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus, Mr. Secretary, my question on submarines and our national security, our military shipbuilding, and as I said specifically, submarines, critical investment for national security and for the economy of my home state of Connecticut. This is a yes or no question, Mr. Secretary. Do you agree that continued investment in the Department of Defense in submarine production is in fact critical to the United States national security and military readiness?
Very critical.
Okay, so yes, thank you, and we agree. They'll continue to be a critical asset to deter adversaries, sustain the advantage we have in undersea domain, and the Defense Department should continue to support these programs. What is the status of the Department's investments in submarine programs?
14% increase in FY26 on the Columbia, and a substantial increase in the Virginia as well. So we're ensuring a submarine industrial base that has been left behind, that has been neglected, is fully invested.
We
to make
have
sure
funded
we're
the
speeding
submarine
up on
base
funding
here.
the submarines.
More than half, and you can go back to last December, but I want to move on. Do you know where our submarine production currently stands, and whether current production is sufficient to bridge the gap between current fleet size and projected need?
There is a gap, but we believe we are closing it, ma'am. Yes.
And if you can get to us the information about how, in fact, that you can close that gap, because we do not have any information or data that can substantiate what you're saying. Your department's initial budget proposal includes incremental funding for the Columbia-class submarine. Is that going to raise alarm bells across the defense industrial base by signaling a lack of commitment to the program?
No, we could not, ma'am. We could not be more committed to Columbia. The centrality in the triad, ensuring it delivers on time, it's central to the deterrent and the base of the United States. So
do you know how much of a financial hole this will create for the defense industrial base? Will there be a financial hole for the defense industrial base in 2026?
Certainly not based on our projections. There is not a hole. We're investing in Columbia robustly.
Okay, without numbers, it's my understanding the department is planning to move $3.1 billion for the Columbia class from 2026 and spread it over 2027 and 2028. This creates a serious problem for industry in the short term and hampers shipbuilders' ability to reach an adequate production rate. Have you been in contact with Electric Boat or with Huntington Ingalls about your plans?
Almost every day, our Deputy Secretary of Defense, alongside our Secretary of the Navy, are actively engaged with all of our shipbuilders and shipyards to make sure their needs not only are being met, but their shortfalls are being addressed so that we can close that gap in real time, which has existed.
So that you can really lay out for us the information and which we would like to get, this committee needs to take a look at, because I know you believe that submarines are important, as I do, but getting the specific information about where we stand, what the production rate is, what gaps there may be. We're willing to listen to all of that because, in fact, in contrast to what your earlier statement was, we have, in fact, supported mightily the submarine industrial base from this committee. That's not been neglected. Do you have a plan for making the investments necessary to ramp up submarine production to the necessary elections? I would just tell you, as part of the December continuing resolution, Congress included $5.7 billion for the department to put on contract for 2 additional Block 4 and 1 Block 5 Virginia-class submarines. The Navy advised members that these funds were required to be placed on contract by February of 2025, yet the department did not put funding for the 2 additional Block 4 boats on contract until April 30th. So do we have a plan, do you have a plan for making the necessary investments to ramp up submarine production to the necessary levels? And what is that plan?
Ma'am, first of all, I want to thank this committee for the flexibility alongside FY25 and the continued resolution.
Well, I would hope you would thank this committee for the funding that it had made. We have made a serious investment. So your first statement is inaccurate. We have focused squarely on submarines, and we now want to know where that is going and what your plan is for the continued advancements to meet production levels and make sure that that is an area that's covered for our national security.
Ma'am, I fully acknowledge the investment this committee has made in shipbuilding, and the challenge is our department under the previous administration squandered a lot of that. By
Please, I want your plan. I've had difficulties with the prior administration, and I don't mind calling them out. What is your plan for the future? Can we get that in writing and on paper so that we know where you're going? Because we don't have anything today. We have zip, nada, and knowing where you're going. You can talk percentages, you can talk about whatever you want, but unless this committee sees dollars and cents and where you're going and what your plan is, then we may reconsider what you need to do to go forward. Give us the details.
Congresswoman, we have the details and we will provide
Then
them
let's
for you.
have them before we, and my hope is that we could get to it before we go to a markup within a few hours here today. I yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back her time. The Dean of the House, Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, gentlemen and lady. Let me ask you about the stunning success of the Ukrainian drones of last week. Are we seeing the ushering in of a new era of warfare? The use of drones from afar. After all, these drones were smuggled into Russia, hidden for a great span of time, and then activated from 2,500 miles away. Are we prepared, both defensively and offensively? Ms. Secretary?
I'll answer that and then maybe hand it to the chairman. I would say, sir, it was a daring and very effective operation that we were not aware of in advance and reflects significant advancements in drone warfare, which we are tracking in real time inside Ukraine and taking that feedback to help us better understand how we can better produce more lethal, attritable drones, but also advance our counter-UAS systems so that we're not vulnerable to a threat and an attack like that. The chairman and I got together right after seeing that and saying, what more can we do to ensure we're prepared and our country's defensible against something like that? But I'll hand it to the chairman.
Mr. Secretary, Congressman, thank you for the question. I think it goes to your more strategic question about is the way and nature that we're fighting our wars changing, sir? The answer is likely yes. Mass numbers of rounds moving back and forth with precision and autonomy are all things that are advancing in the technology trend exponentially. One of the things that I've talked with some of the leaders of this community and committee about are buying capabilities along the technology curve or ahead of it. And so I do think it was a bold move, and it represents a new and different way of fighting wars as we've seen over the past few years in that particular fight, sir.
What do we need to do to protect ourselves from a similar type raid by an adversary?
Well, sir, intelligence is critical. Human intelligence, signals intelligence, every aspect of how we get ahead, get to the left of a problem like that. And certainly our department in conjunction interagency are focused on that. But then it's rapidly fielding the commercially available technologies in some cases, but others proprietary, whether they're EW, whether they're microwave, whether they're kinetic, to defeat drones either individually or in swarms in multiple locations against, protecting our people, protecting our installations, protecting our critical infrastructure, protecting our bombers. And some of that speaks to Golden Dome and what we'll do there, but you also have the particulars of the immediate. Our forward deployed troops, are they properly covered by counter-UAS systems? Do we have the best systems forward deployed? And that's something we're looking at every single day. We live in a dynamic operating environment, and the chairman knows this, the deputy, our policy shop, we are focused on ensuring that this is front and center, considering how central this threat will be going forward.
Well, these are low-cost, high-tech weapons, if you will, and has been dominated by China. 90% of drones are produced by China, I'm told. What does that tell us about what we need to do here at home?
Well, sir, it's not just, first of all, making sure we're less reliant on Chinese technology in any part of the supply chain, which is something we can speak to because that's been an aggressive part of our effort at DOD. But also recognizing it's not just China. Of course, Iran invests substantially in drone capabilities. And then learning a lot from partners on our side, like the Ukrainians who have developed systems and fielding that quickly. So commercially available, attritable, that we can produce at home is important to us.
Congratulations to all three of you, and we wish you well. Yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman for the question. Real quickly, is it the press stories accurate that 40% of the long-range bombers from Russia were destroyed in that attack? Is that an accurate number?
So I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is, but I also know that I may not say that in open session. So I'll take that and get back to you through appropriate channels.
Thanks, gentlemen. Ms. Capter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome our guests. I come from a family of combat veterans going back a long time. And my comment is the use of certain words and what they imply. When I hear warrior ethos, and I hear it a lot from you, Mr. Secretary, I'm concerned. All the soldiers in our family, all of whom fought and received medals for their combat service, call themselves soldiers. Marines are trained to kill. In terms of domestic policing, our police and our National Guard at the state level, carefully used, but also our state police are used in civil enforcement, and they are good. I don't need any reply. I just am concerned about what those words you often utter actually do in people's minds and change the language we have used since the founding of this republic. So that is a concern of mine.